Okay, welcome everyone to this InFI's special online session about COVID-19 and its impact on medicine, science, economy, education, and society. I hope that everyone that is connected today is safe, and also your dear ones. My name is Maria Soriano, and I am the Vice President of InFI Foundation. And before to start with the session today, I want to give a brief overview of what we are doing at InFI. InFI is a non-profit organization that in close collaboration with its partner universities, the University of Valladolid, Autónoma de Madrid, Europea Miguel de Cervantes, Politécnica de Valencia, Sevilla, Málaga, Oviedo, Aveiro, and Miño, and also in collaboration with companies interested in talent like Mirai Advisory, Congalsa, GMB, or Amadeus, and regional governments like Fomento San Sebastián, the Consejería Principado de Asturias, and many other organizations that support us. All together, we have co-created what we call the first virtual European Innovation Hub, which is an innovative, educational, scientific global platform of talent that benefits the career development of the talent in the network, and at the same time fights the brain drain and the youth unemployment, and promotes the international knowledge flow, collaboration, and innovation. Currently, this network reunites more than 250 members in the fields of biomedicine, engineering, economics, entrepreneurship, and behavioral science, and includes top students and professors from InFI's partner universities, and also highly qualified Portuguese and Spanish professionals working in the top organizations in the world, in the 5 continents, research institutes, universities, and companies in 5 continents. InFI makes the most of bringing together this diverse and multidisciplinary talent by creating a series of programs and initiatives like the online communication platform. We also create seed grants to fund innovative projects created within the network. Also, global companies propose challenges to our network. We have launched 3 online quarter courses on innovation, scientific careers, and career development. We also have a mentoring program where the students selected to be part of the network are matched with an international mentor, an international professional that gives professional advice during the whole academic year. Also, these students have the opportunity to win fellowships to carry out professional internship at elite organizations like Harvard or MIT. We have a recruiting program because there are companies interested to offer jobs to the talent in the network. Also, the scientists in the platform give seminars about the latest scientific discoveries. We always promote the international visibility of our partners, and every year we organize an international conference which has the format of an innovation camp in order to promote more collaboration and innovations. This year, because of this pandemic situation, we have to do it online, and we are excited to do it online. It would be on May 25th. And now let's start with the session. I have to say that at InFI we are so proud to have to count with a network, a very diverse network, and that has a lot to say about this current coronavirus situation. And we have put together a panel of 9 experts from different fields, and that they are gonna share with you all their knowledge and experience about the situation and about the coronavirus in their fields, and they will answer all your questions. So please, there is a Q&A section. Leave there all your questions, and they will answer them at the end. And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce who is going to be our moderator and also panelist today, Borja Santos Porras. He is the Executive Director at the ES School of Global and Public Affairs. He is also the Director of the International Expansion at InFI. and he's helping us in many aspects. And so now the floor is yours, Borja, and the panelists. Thank you so much for sharing all your experience with everyone.
Thank you, Maria, for this fantastic introduction of what INFI is doing. I think INFI Foundation is generating a lot of value, especially when we are facing global issues like this crisis. And this is an example of what INFI can do when we are connecting people that work in science, in private sector, in public sector, people from the US, from Massachusetts, from Maryland, people from Spain, different cities like Madrid, Valladolid, or Oviedo, people, guest speakers from Mexico, from Colombia, and our audience that probably as well are spread worldwide. So nowadays that cooperation and international transfer of knowledge is more valuable than ever to solve a global issues that is affecting us. So I want to really thank Maria Soriano because she has been the person coordinating all of us and managing the feasibility of this conference. So we are dividing this talk in 4 main themes: medicine, science, economic and public policy, economic and public policy and society. And as Maria was saying, please, while our speakers are speaking, don't be afraid, shoot your questions and we will compile them all and organize them to be answered by the speakers at the end of the talk. So let's go with the medicine topic, and Jordina Rincon Torroella is starting. She's a neurosurgery resident at Johns Hopkins University at the US. And probably many of you, when you have been checking the numbers and watching the news, you have probably seen that most of the data comes from Johns Hopkins University. Johns Hopkins University is a reference on public health and is being a reference on the numbers. So from Jordina, it will be great if we can know a little bit more. Well, first of all, how is the current situation in US hospitals, because she's working there, but what are the numbers expected, the different scenarios, and how Johns Hopkins somehow is providing to the world these real-time world maps that give us information about the COVID cases, because these resources are very important. And you know that numbers are very important. We all wonder if these numbers are realistic. How is our capacity to forecast numbers? What are the different standards and measurements that countries are following? Are we using the same data? Are we realistic when we compare countries between countries? And what is the purpose of using these numbers for public health policy? So Jordina, these questions are very interesting. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Borja. Good morning, everybody. Just to start with a very necessary disclosure, what I'm discussing today is my personal point of view and what I got with research and my experience at Johns Hopkins, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the opinion of the institution itself. And as you can see here, yes, I agree that Johns Hopkins has been very essential following the development of the coronavirus. This is a screenshot of the map showing the numbers for the United States as of yesterday at 5 p.m. We had 500,000 of reported cases with more than 18,000 deaths. And this morning, worldwide, I was checking before joining you, and we were hitting globally 1,712,000 cases. And I'm going to explain a little bit how the map works, but first of all, very briefly, if we can go to the next slides, we will talk about the predictions. All these numbers started with the predictions with universities such as the University of Washington. We can see here the prediction for the United States, which interestingly enough, the peak of maximum cases was predicted for today. And as you can see here, there have been a lot of numbers that have been telling us how many beds we're gonna need, how many ICU beds we are gonna need. And now we see those numbers and how those numbers are climbing. And what we are seeing actually is that we are a little bit below the predictions. And if we can go to the next slide, I would like to explain how we are changing the numbers of the predictions, both worldwide and here in the United States. So this is a slide that was presented by Governor Cuomo from New York yesterday to show a little bit that the predicted number of cases and need of beds at the hospital actually when from 70,000 all the way to 136,000 numbers of beds required in New York. And to explain a little bit the situation of the current hospitals, New York City hospital started with 35,000 beds per Governor Cuomo's numbers yesterday, and they have been able to prepare to accommodate up to 90,000 beds. That is above some of the predictions, but as you can see, it's not covering all the numbers that we're initially predicting. So how are we defeating this, and how are we decreasing the numbers? Two things. One, with the government and individually doing things like social distancing or quarantine, which is decreasing the number of infected people. And second, it's a truly heroic effort what some of the hospitals are doing. As you can see here, doubling the numbers of beds. And I like to define the work that the hospitals, as I see, are doing in three major aspects. One, conservation efforts. Months ago at Johns Hopkins, we stopped doing any scheduled non-emergent cases. A lot of the surgeons were sent back home. A lot of our rotations were canceled to preserve people, to preserve PPE, and to keep rooms open. So far, we think that with the PPE, we are okay. The second part was the reorganization of the entire hospital. If you want to go to the next slide, you can see the numbers at Johns Hopkins that are redistributed to us. So right now, our bed capacity here is almost 2,000 total beds, which are already being filled. 40% of our ICU beds are being filled by COVID patients, and 25% of our beds by acute COVID patients. As you can see here, we receive information every day that we can access in our dashboards. The mechanical ventilator utilization is a little bit below 80% at Johns Hopkins, half of it by COVID patients, half of it by regular patients that are still coming to the hospital. And that this is the reorganization of all the hospitals to try to get beds and resources from everywhere. And then the third part is the redeployment, because you can have as many material resources as you want, but if you don't have people, nurses, healthcare providers, doctors, residents, taking care of that, people cleaning the floors, people helping with food, there's no way that you can use all those beds. So now the situation in a lot of hospitals in the United States is that radiologists, surgeons, psychiatrists, they are all redeployed to take care of COVID patients. As of right now, at Johns Hopkins, the numbers, as you can see, are a little bit lower because Maryland didn't hit us as hard. And how we are following these, if we can go to the next slide, worldwide, is with a coronavirus resource center. This map that we are talking, and very briefly, because I'm running out of time, this map was built by two main researchers. One is Professor Lauren Garner, who is a professor at Johns Hopkins of Civil and Systems Engineering, and her graduate student, Sheng Dong. You can see their pictures here. And it's an effort of all these entities, the School of Engineering, the ESRI, the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins, the CCSE. And it was first shared publicly on January 22nd. And to follow your question about how reliable is the data, we can go to my last slide that shows how this data is collected. So as the professor Laura explains, it's a combination in between manual and automate introduction of all this data that comes from all these sources, including the WHO, the CDC from China, and several departments of health at these different countries, as Taiwan, Europe, Italy, Singapore, the ECDC. So all these numbers, which are the numbers that are publicly reported, are the numbers that Johns Hopkins is using to feed into this map. And the data is updated daily by the hour. So I will be happy to answer any more questions about how the hospitals are working here or how the map works later in the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Jordina. Very interesting. So again, if you have any question about Jordina, please write it in the chat and we will compile them later. So the second speaker Her name is Alicia González Martinez, and she's currently a neurology resident and a PhD candidate in neurology at University Hospital La Princesa from Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. And well, some of the main issues that we are going to tackle during the second part of the second talk is about what are the main treatments used in patients with COVID-19. And Jordina and Alicia, both of them are working somehow in neurosurgery and in neurology, and they have been probably seen reorganization of their medical care units to treat COVID-19 patients. So it will be nice as well to know a little bit how is the current situation in the hospitals in Madrid in that kind of reorganization. So please, Alicia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I will briefly comment on the reorganization of care units that we've been facing these days, which have been pretty similar to what Georgina just said. The measures have been to suspend non-urgent activities, surgeries, non-urgent appointments, the launch of a telephone monitoring program, to hire backup nurses, assistants, caretakers, medical students even, to create COVID teams, to establish alliances between public and private centers in order to provide enough critical care units, to create resources such as medicalized hotels for people who cannot perform home isolation, or at the hospital level and in healthcare centers, a reorganization of the workforce to prioritize care for COVID-19. We have been part of COVID teams led by different departments, internal medicine, infectious disease, pneumology departments, and we have been taking part of these teams during the past few weeks. And well, I think that's been pretty similar everywhere. And talking about treatments, first of all, I would say that current clinical management includes infection prevention and control measures, as well as supportive care, including supplemental oxygen and mechanical ventilatory support when indicated. Some of the available treatments that we are going to talk about today are newly developed molecules, and others are medicines already authorized for other indications. Although there are a lot of clinical trials on the way, more than 400 right now, there is currently no evidence from controlled clinical trials to recommend a specific treatment for SARS-CoV-2. To date, there are only partial preliminary data, sometimes only in vitro or even contradictory on the efficacy of one or the other product. We're going to use this slide from CDC about the classification of COVID-19 disease state and potential therapeutic targets, showing 3 phases of disease progression to talk about potential phase-specific therapies. Stage 1, early infection, is the initial stage that occurs at the time of inoculation and early establishment of disease. For most people, that involves an incubation period associated with mild and often non-specific symptoms such as malaise, fever, or dry cough. At tests, we can see lymphopenia or neutrophilia without other significant abnormalities. Treatment at this stage is primarily targeted towards symptomatic relief, should a viable antiviral therapy such as lopinavir, ritonavir, or remdesivir that we're going to talk about be proven beneficial, targeting selected patients during this stage may reduce duration of symptoms, minimize contagiousness, and prevent progression of severity. Stage 2, moderate pulmonary involvement to A without or to B with hypoxia. This is the second stage of established pulmonary disease, viral multiplication, and localized inflammation in the lung, and this is the norm. During this stage, patients develop a viral pneumonia with cough, fever, and possibly hypoxia. Blood tests reveal increasing lymphopenia along with transaminitis. Markers of systemic inflammation may be elevated, but not remarkably so. And at this stage, most patients need to be hospitalized for close observation and management. Treatment would be primarily consist on supportive measures and available antiviral therapies such as remdesivir, corticoids, or tocilizumab. In early stage 2, the use of corticosteroids in these patients may be avoided. However, if hypoxia issues or the patient progresses or require mechanical ventilation, this situation we use anti-inflammatory therapies such as corticosteroids. Stage 3, severe systemic inflammation. A minority of patients will transition to this third and most severe stage of illness, which manifests as an extrapulmonary systemic inflammation syndrome. In this stage, markers of systemic inflammation appear to be elevated. Studies have shown that inflammatory cytokines such as biomarkers such as interleukin-2, 6, or protein C D-dimer are significantly elevated in those patients. And a form akin to hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis may occur in these patients, and this is something important. In this phase, we use corticosteroids. These drugs may be justified together with tocilizumab or anakinra in order to fight this extremely high inflammation, this extremely scenario of inflammation. And moreover, I think maybe they're going to talk about it later, but there is a new hypothesis on the physiopathology of COVID-19, and the virus will or would attack hemoglobin that carry oxygen and carbon dioxide, and the lungs have extremely intense poisoning and inflammatory due to the inability of exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen frequently. And well, that's another hypothesis, and in this case, chloroquine and flavipiravir have been selected as possible or potential treatments according to this hypothesis. We're going to talk a little bit about each of the drugs that we are using currently here. Lopinavir ritonavir from stage 1. This is a human immunodeficiency virus protease inhibitor indicated in combination with other agents, antiretrovirals, for the treatment of HIV in adults and pediatric population. And it's been recommended by Chinese health authorities during the crisis in this country. We have a first open-label randomized control clinical trial of antiviral therapy that was recently published, and there were no more beneficial effects. However, it's been speculated, for example, that dose administered was suboptimal at the time at the start of treatment, 13 days median from the start of the disease. Anti-randomization may also be a key factor. And well, it's considered to have a putative beneficial effect in replication of the virus, so it's being used at the very beginning stage of the disease. Remdesivir, that's also a potential therapeutic drug used currently in Spain in the ICU, and it is an unauthorized nucleotide analog that interferes with RNA polymerase in the virus, and the use of clinical trials has been as a compassionate use for especially hospitalized patients with ventilation, mechanic ventilation. It was initially developed as a treatment for Ebola virus, but it also has an in vitro activity against other viruses, so including coronavirus. Talking about hydroxychloroquine, from stage 1, this is an antimalarial that has been used especially for autoimmune diseases such as systemic lupus erythematosus, and it's there is currently it is used in hospitals because the efficacy, it's been evaluated in more than 30 clinical trials, and although the level of evidence is considered to be still low, there are some preclinical and safety data on other indications. So we're currently using this drug at the very first stage. Azithromycin, that's the results of a French cohort suggest that hydroxychloroquine with combination with azithromycin may be useful. The proportion of patients with a negative SARS-CoV-2 viral load in nasopharyngeal secretion at 6 days of treatment was lower in patients with combined treatment, so it's also being used. However, it's important to consider that both of them prolong QT segment in electrocardiogram, so may be used with precaution. Tocilizumab, that's used from stage 2. This is an immunosuppressive agent, interleukin-6 inhibitor, authorized for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis and cytokine release syndrome associated with treatment with CAR-T. And it is included in the treatment plan used by China National Health Commission as well. However, tocilizumab has not received approval from the health authorities for this indication in the country, but currently is being used. The largest trial was started after observing the results of some patients with severe or critical pneumonia, and it can be prescribed after receiving corticosteroids with the criteria including patients who, according to their baseline clinical condition, would be an ICU admission subsidiary with interstitial pneumonia with severe respiratory failure or rapid respiratory worsening, as well as presence of extrapulmonary organic failure or critical systemic inflammatory response. Corticosteroids from stage 2 can be used, should be considered according to indications for routine clinical practice, such as bronchospasm, but also in the inflammation or in the inflammatory phase of the infection, stage 2, considered or characterized by progressive inflammation, for progressive respiratory rate increase, persistent fever, progression of inflammatory parameters or radiological infiltrates, usually from 7 to day 10 after onset of symptoms and fever. Heparin, anticoagulant therapy, mainly with low molecular weight heparin, appears to be associated with better prognosis in severe COVID-19 patients, meeting sepsis-induced coagulopathy criteria or with markedly elevated D-dimer. And intermediate doses are also being used in severe infection or patients with a high risk of thrombosis due to severe COVID infection. And there are other treatments such as sarinumab or eculizumab, interferon beta, colchicine that are being used, but not as generally as the other ones that we've been talking about, as well as the vaccine that we're going to talk about later. So I would say as a take-home message, I would say that current clinical management includes infection prevention and control measures and supportive care, including supplemental oxygen as well as mechanical ventilatory support when indicated, and moreover potential therapies for COVID-19, such as lopinavir, hydroxychloroquine, or plus or without azithromycin, corticoids, tocilizumab, sarinumab, and remdesivir, as well as heparin, which are under continuous investigation and review are potential therapies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alicia. This was a fantastic summary of the therapeutic options for COVID-19. And now we will have Adriana Patricia Rodriguez Hernandez. She's professor, scientist, and manager of the research laboratories in odontology from the University of Mexico. And it will be very interesting, actually, to hear how COVID-19 is managed in dental clinics. So please, Adriana, the floor is yours. Thank you for connecting from Mexico. So early, actually.
Thank you very much. Well, in my own experience as a dentist and oral bacteriologist, a dentist can be the key to the contribution of two things: to be an entry point to diagnose infection diseases, or to be the first spreader of any oral infection, especially by the aerosols and proximity in treatments, in oral treatments. So we have to pay a lot of attention. A dentist job involves mandatory, we work with personal barrier protections. Also, we acquire the knowledge about the correct instrumental surfaces disinfection. But the most important, we do an anamnesis of patients, gathering very important information about symptoms, breathing, blood pressure, body weight, etc. But now, with COVID-19 pandemic, we must follow additional recommendation. Here in the slide, you have a screenshot about CDC recommendation, and you can follow this, the link in NCBI about Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, some dental settings and key concepts, and you can review them after the talk if you want. Here, a summarize of the recommendations are: we have to work with an isolation room with negative pressure, also using N95 filtering disposable respirators. But the most important, we must attend only emergencies, and despite all recommendations, we do not provide a complete protections against the inhalation of airborne infection agents. So this is the reason, because we have to ask us if we are prepared for this pandemic. So as we don't have a viable SARS-CoV-2 test for everyone, we must give home care instructions to our patients. We as a dentist have to learn how to teach to our patients, if possible, delay dental care until we not be at risk. That means that we must give home care instructions and any appropriate pharmaceutical receipts. And our duty now as a dentist is to learn how to stay home and give online dental instructions to our patients, and especially in these countries where we don't have a viable test for everyone. This is my recommendation today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Adriana. And now, so we finished the theme of medicine, and now we are moving to the second one that we have today about science. And with us, we have Ana Cadete, who is a scientist and she's managing the Delivery Innovation Unit in Moderna Therapeutics. She's working from Boston, and she's actually our coordinator of the Portuguese network. And I'm sure that we have people connected from Portugal today. So welcome, Ana. So in your case, I think it will be very interesting to know something that a lot of people are wondering. So what is the process involved in the discovery and the development of a new vaccine? How long does it take from the discovery and to the commercialization? Because even though at some point we might hear that the discovery will arrive, but what will be maybe the challenges and the goals to having the vaccine available globally? I don't know if there will be stages or depending on the countries, I don't know. Like, would we be able to have companies prepared to produce vaccines at global level and we will be able to access them? So I think here we have a lot of questions that I'm sure you can give us some clues and some ideas.
Thank you very much, Borja. Up front, I just must say that my intervention is not on behalf of Moderna. As a pharmacist and a scientist, I'm using my knowledge and research skills to keep you informed and share my personal opinion. Considering the process involved in the discovery and development of a vaccine, we can divide it in three main stages. We have preclinical, in which we consider the research and development made in the lab, and we do some experiments in cell and animals. Then we have the clinical phase, where we go to try the vaccine in humans. And here we have the phase 1, where a small number of people are tested. And it's really important because we need to know the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. In the second stage, we inject the vaccine in a larger number of people. And then later it comes the commercialization once we are sure that this vaccine is safe and shows efficacy. To simplify, we can divide the production of vaccines in two main approaches. The traditional approach, in which the vaccine is composed by the virus, usually using live attenuated or inactive antigens, and the new vaccines based in nucleic acids such as pDNA and mRNA, where a sequence that mimic the viral protein is responsible for the immune response. The main advantage of traditional vaccines is that they are around for so many years that we are sure the success of them. And companies are ready to manufacture billions of doses every year for a known virus, such is the case of the influenza known as the normal flu. What is happening is that this process is not able to speed up the production of a new virus. So the virus needs to grow in a large culture medium, needs to be purified, etc. And this is a long and complex process. On the other hand, the new nucleic acid-based vaccines are much faster to process, from the gene sequence to the final product. And we can see for some of the companies that are listed, for example, Innoview, a company based in San Francisco, said that it took them 3 hours to design the DNA vaccine. On the same way, Moderna, the company in Cambridge, was able to go from the mRNA sequence to the first clinical vial. They are able to speed up the process. The main hurdle is that, the main hurdle is that these vaccines are not yet approved, and we don't have so far a technology that we know for sure is going to work based in this technology. The development of a vaccine from the bench to the market can take 10 to 15 years. And it is true that these new vaccines are shortened the time one would spend in the lab, but it's still not sure that we will make this process in less than 5 years. In the case of a pandemic, we are taking every step to rush the development of a vaccine, except one. A vaccine needs to prove to be safe and effective before it's approved. As you can see in the slides, right now we have 4 new vaccines in phase 1 clinical trials, and all of them are based on the nucleic acid technology. And we have 1 vaccine that since this past week is in 2-3 clinical trials. This vaccine is known as the BCG. It's a vaccine used against tuberculosis, and because it's already commercialized and we know its safety, is being used in a large number of healthcare workers, and we are going to see if this can be used against the coronavirus. I would say that the new vaccine against this virus would not be expected to be in the market in less than 12 to 18 months. And we have many more vaccines that are under preclinical evaluation. When it comes to the challenge of having a vaccine available globally, I have to say, like, this is a great challenge, and there's no company that is ready to manufacture billions of doses for everyone at once. And what I think it's interesting to see, and I also highlighted in the slides, is that there's a huge effort and a great collaboration between big pharma and some of the new technology companies, as we see with Pfizer and BioNTech, or Sanofi and Translate Bio. So one is bringing the knowledge, the manufacturing, and the scale-up capacity, while the other comes with innovation. And we also see that companies are working at an incredible pace, and these are also getting help through funding from BARDA, CEPI, and NIH. So if we see J&J is working with BARDA, and so this funding is for them to start producing millions of vials of a vaccine that they don't know is going to work yet. So this is a huge risk, but if the clinical trial comes positive and the vaccine is safe and effective, they can already start immunizing a lot of people. In the case of a pandemic where the whole world is affected, we only have one choice, and that's immunize everyone. There are a lot of questions about who is going to get immunized first and how is the vaccine worldwide being distributed. And I think that governments and governmental and non-governmental associations need to come together to ensure an equal distribution. Considering the main challenges and opportunities that we are facing right now, I would say that no doubt the commercialization and global availability of a vaccine is the main one. So despite incredible progress in a search time, we still have to prove that the vaccine is safe, effective, and can be manufactured, distributed, and administered to people. So here, my opinion is that we don't have a scientific challenge, but we are facing a very complex scientific, economic, and political one. Regarding opportunities, I also think we have the bright side. Like never before, society was paying more attention to scientists than football. Academic labs, big pharma, and biotech are working together to find a solution. Governmental and non-governmental associations are financing the development of new vaccine candidates, and the knowledge generated right now will have a tremendous positive impact in the future. And also, new technologies like nucleic acid vaccines have a chance to prove their efficacy and safety, giving a lot of people hope to access innovative therapies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for very illustrative all these updates about the process and the potential distribution, etc. And now we have Joaquín López. Joaquín is a medical engineer at the Universidad Complutense from Madrid. And it's going to be very interesting to learn how the Spanish scientific community is reacting to the crisis, what are the different projects proposed to fight COVID-19, how the researchers are working in coordination and in partnership between different universities, but as well with institute, private sector, or the governments. And I guess researchers are facing as well challenges, but opportunities at the same time. As Anna was saying, there is a lot of awareness and attention on the potential and the value of researchers nowadays. So please, Joaquín, give us some insights about these issues. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Borja, for the introduction. As we all know, we are facing a very unique situation. I think that we are more ready than ever to face this with all the scientific tools that we have been developing over years, talking about not only vaccines and medicines and all the surveillance methods, all the big data that we have been hearing for a long time. And now is the moment to actually put all these pieces together, just trying to be able to combat this situation. I think that we are learning a lot of lessons from this situation, and the idea is that we should be better prepared for next time that it occurs, because it is clear that there has been a time that we lost some time during the preparation. I think that some countries has been better prepared for this. I'm thinking about South Korea and how they were able to handle this better than other countries. But I think that these are the lessons that we are learning. From the point of view of research, it's Probably one of the main or the weakest points in research is how long does it take from call for a research proposal is started and until the actual research and the funding is allocated and the actual research is performed. There is a long delay, and actually this is not valid for a situation like this. So in my case, in the slide, what I was trying to show is that how many different institutions and from European Commission, from Spanish government and other institutions, including private ones, are trying to find the best way to handle this in a fast way. So actually, it's very interesting to see how they are handling. And let's hope that this actually is going to be useful in the future for being able to give a faster response to any crisis that we may face as a society. So for instance, one interesting thing is that, for instance, there is one, this called fast grants that basically you can give a response in 48 hours. So these are funding, I think that they allocated around 12 million from private foundation, from private donors who actually wants to make things happen. Actually, it's interesting that, for instance, instead of just preparing a large CV with a specific format, they only ask you for your Google Scholar profile. So it's something that any researcher may have. So actually you can use this to basically apply for funding. And Amazon, for instance, is the Amazon Web Services is doing something similar. In their case, they're allocating 20 million just to use their computer resources. For those who doesn't know, most of the profits from Amazon comes from the computer resources from the Amazon Web Services, more than the sellings that as a retailer. And basically they are allocating this 20 million for researchers who wants to do some data mining or who wants to use the computer resources to fight the COVID-19. The European Union actually, for instance, created an extraordinary call for this, allocating significant amount of money, and there are more of this coming. From the point of view of Spain, there's an open call, and there are already 19 projects. Some of them are related to one of the topics that we have already seen, the vaccines and some treatments, as Alicia was mentioning. And the idea is that this is an open call that is allocating fundings. I think that up to a total of 24 million. And in this case is trying to answer specific points on not only detection, but also how to staging of the patients, how to be able to improve the PCRs that we know that has some limitation in terms of how fast they can give response or what is being detected. So there are many of these calls that are, and in the region of Madrid, there also has been, for instance, a hackathon just trying to improve or give response in a fast way. With 2 days, everything has been online and just trying to combine different researchers to work together in a virtual environment. So there are many things that we are learning as a scientist just to work from all over the world together and then combining the information. I think that it's amazing how many web pages, how many repositories, how many publications has been appearing over each day. It's amazing. If you want to be up to date with everything that is being published, is almost impossible, but it's clear that everybody is just trying to contribute, and I think that it's a unique situation, and I think that we're learning a lot of lessons that hopefully after all this crisis is over, we are going to be able to learn to give response to other pandemics or other crises that may occur. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. So now we are gonna, so with Joaquin, we ended the theme of science, and we are gonna speak about economy, and public policy. And our next speaker, Marco Garcia, he works as a senior investment operations analyst at Manulife Asset Management, and he's based in Brighton, Massachusetts, in the US. And one of the aspects that is concerning, that COVID-19 is concerning is definitely the economic impact of the pandemic. And all of us, we are wondering what is the potential impact of the crisis And we are going to speak now about the financial markets and how that effect in the financial markets can be translated to the private sector, to the states, to the economy of the families and individuals. So it would be nice to know or to discuss the different economic and financial measures that are already taken and what others could be recommended. So please, Marco, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks, Borja. Hi, everyone. And just so what I'm going to talk about is mainly my opinion, my personal opinion. It has nothing to do with Manulife Investment Management, just full disclosure. So these are interesting times economic-wise. These are unprecedented times. We've never experienced anything like this, where the economy was completely shut down, with lots of unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. And there is because of that, there is also a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know what's going to happen with the virus, and that determines a lot of what's going to happen in the economy. If you think about these, in the United States, there is 42 states, 95% of individuals, and a similarly large share of GDP are under a stay-at-home order, which means that businesses are being disrupted all over the country, impacting a huge amount of the GDP that is produced in this country on a daily basis. Of course, President Trump wants to, go back to business sooner rather than later, but I think that reality will prove him wrong. And it looks to me that this is going to be for much longer than he expected, and for much longer than he actually wants to keep this lockdown state that we currently have. This is having a huge impact on everyone, and that's visible. That's common knowledge. The unemployment rate has escalated very, very fast from 50-year lows, like literally a month ago, until probably one of the highest rates that we had in the recent past. I think at this point we have like almost 17 million people unemployed in the United States. The U.S. has taken, this is a lot of people. It's very easy to fire people, and businesses are resorting to that because they see that they have no revenue, so they have to take measures to survive. That's key here, because how long these shutdown and these measures that the governments are taking to prevent the pandemic from spreading are impacting the economy, and this is gonna impact how many companies can survive, without revenues for this amount of time, right? That there are different measures that the governments are taking, like there is a lot of public spending, a lot of public money being thrown out to the markets, and the Federal Reserve has helped a lot to avoid a financial crisis. I don't know if you remember, like seeing in the news, the first 2 or 3 weeks, the second or third week of March were very dramatic in terms of what was happening in the financial markets, where there was very poor liquidity. Everybody was trying to get out of whatever they could. They wanted to get cash, and that impacted how the markets were functioning, to the point where the Federal Reserve had to intervene and become a buyer of anything they could. So they were buying all kinds of bonds, not only government bonds, but like government guaranteed bonds, asset-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, whatever they could find, just to make the markets work again properly. And they were able to do it. They were able to facilitate the markets functioning, and that prevented like a financial crisis, right on top of the health crisis that we have. But that only fixes the liquidity in the markets. Now we have to, think about, this unemployment problem that we're having. How many, like, our defaults are going to probably increase in the next few weeks, the next few months. And again, it all comes down to how long are we going to be, at home? How long is the consumer not going to be spending money and, making businesses make money again? So that's key. And as I was listening to Ana Cadete talking about the vaccine, it looks to me that it's going to take longer than a lot of people expect. So I don't know what's going to happen. What's for sure is that we're going to see a lot of volatility in the markets. You know, we are already, the Standard & Poor's went up 23% from the March 23 low. So 23% increase in the stocks from March 23rd. That's unbelievable. That's a lot of volatility. So we're probably going to see these for the next few weeks until we have more clarity on what's going to happen. So just to summarize, from the United States, huge response from the Federal Reserve, huge response from the Treasury, from the government in terms of public spending. Now what's going to happen in the European Union? To me, in my opinion, the European Union hasn't responded as strong as the United States has done. So, you know, we'll see what happens. There are different approaches to the same problem, but the European Union was much slower in responding to the situation. The European Central Bank has responded, but I don't think that as much as the United States Federal Reserve has. And the same thing for the fiscal response hasn't been as strong as the United States one, in my opinion. Part of the problem is in the European Union is how much debt these countries can take on, or, you know, how much new debt can they issue. Like talking about Spain or Italy, they were already into a lot of debt before this crisis started. How much can they issue? How much can the market absorb from these countries? You know, until they start thinking like, am I going to get my money back? So that's going to be, from my point of view, like a problem going forward. Same thing for the emerging markets. Like how much issue can certain market? How much debt can certain markets issue? That's going to be a problem. You know, emerging markets don't have the resources that the United States or the European Union have. So how is this going to impact them? Is going to be also something that we need to think about, or that we need to monitor in the next few weeks or months, because emerging markets don't have the same access to the financial markets as the United States or the European Union do. So, you know, not only we have the oil issue, but the pandemic issue. So this is causing waves of travel all around the place. Eventually, you know, we're going to recover, but I think it's going to be slow and it will take time and a lot of pain probably. So I don't know. Stay tuned and, you know, stay positive and healthy. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco, for the updates on the economy and financial issues. So now it's my turn. Allow me to speak 5 minutes on the public policy issue. I think, and in my case, more than recommendations, I'm going to launch questions that we will need to make ourselves from our society and from our governments. So I think there are clearly 3 different stages that we are experiencing depending on the stage. Obviously, maybe China and Korea have already moved in some of them, but maybe Latin American countries are starting. So the first phase is slowing the spread. The second one is the reopening phase. And the final one would be that all restrictions can be lifted, right? So I'm going to focus a little bit on how we can, in the reopening phase, that is kind of like the one that Spain is starting to face, right? So there are some different aspects that are going to be considered. The first one, as you can see, is reopening by industries, right? As we have seen, the lockdown, at least in Spain, was focused on essential jobs. Now from Monday, construction, industrial work, and maybe others are going to reopen. And we will need to see, depending on which industry. And for some people, obviously this is necessary because of the economy, but for others it's really dangerous, because at some point, if we move too quickly, we might have again peaks, and we need to come back very soon to lockdown, to quarantine, and we might lose the trust of the society, and that can have a lot of issues on mental health, etc. We need to think that maybe the reopening might be by locations and not only by countries. That is so far how it is done and is centralized in many cases, but maybe by provinces or by regions, depending on the status. It's going to be as well by ages, by age groups, even though the quarantine might disappear little by little, but if we don't have vaccines and if we don't have other measures, the high vulnerable people like elders are going to be still vulnerable. So what kind of public policies are we going to impose or are we going to establish to protect them, right? If we are reopening our movements. And what are the different policy measures that should be taken? So the first one, definitely scaling diagnostic testing capacity. And this is something that most of the countries are working, but it's hard because of the lack of resources, the lack of testing, the lack of the items to provide this test, but this will be essential. The second one will be build capacity at hospitals, as we have seen, I mean, from the government, but also from the civil society in Spain. It has been mobilized to provide equipment, ventilators, and even to increase the bed capacity. So this has happened in Spain, but it's going to happen in many South American and African countries as well, and improve the quality of the healthcare workforce, because many of them will be as well affected, as we have seen. The third one that is kind of controversial, and I'm not sure why, but is wearing masks. That in Asia is quite popular, but it seems that in Western countries, it's hard for us, maybe because of our culture, to wear a mask, right? The other day I was wearing a mask in the street. I mean, I went out and my parents told me, but don't wear a mask because people might feel that you are sick. And well, I don't feel sick, but you never know if you are asymptomatic, right? And it should be not only an optional thing, but probably for the next month, it might be something that it might be more mandatory. The third one, contact tracing, how we are going to track people vulnerable, right? So we have experiences from Singapore and Korea that either by Bluetooth or satellite position, they have been able to track people. It was anonymous. You didn't know the individual, but you could know where the cases that were positive have been moving. If, for example, they were in your same building, etc., etc. So thanks to that, they were able to stop. There are another initiatives for tracking in Italy. For example, in Lombardia, there is one to control if people are moving from the quarantine. So there is an alarm kind of when you move out of 300 meters, the distance. But contact tracing is even more, I mean, people are observing that in Europe, we have a lot of issues with privacy. But there are some issues that we could control. I mean, first of all, that tracing and tracking should be used only for healthy means and for a limited duration. This will be very crucial. And at some point, maybe it could be volunteer, but obviously volunteer having some advantages. The advantages, it could be that if you are using or if you are tracked, you could have immediate access to tests if there is something, if you have been exposed, or that you could have a quick medical support and following, for example. So it could be, even though it's volunteer, it could be attractive for people to be tracked for a limited amount of duration. So the fifth one could be avoid crowds, right? And there are different, here we will be very creative depending on the countries. How we can regulate minimum distance? We have seen this in many stores and things like that, but even in markets, how we are gonna control that social gathering. Is going to be less than 50 people in one place, how many people. So each country would need to decide how they are going to control those crowds. The sixth one will be definitely hygiene and disinfection. And we have seen that the military is supporting in these cases. And the military service will be something that it will be as well controversial. For example, in China, the Chinese army has been very active and providing basic supplies in the cities. So for example, the lockdown was very strict and it was the military service who were providing food to community social workers, and the community social workers were delivering on door-to-door basis. So it was a huge logistical support from the state. Obviously in our countries, we work very differently, right? And it will be very controversial if we somehow having a militarized state, but at some point we need to balance how their efficiency and their utility will be used, right? The eighth one would be policies regarding international flights. So at some point as well, we will need to open our borders. So how we are going to do that? So there are different ideas like, are we going to certify that people have immunity? But if we are doing that, it will be potentially create a debate on ethical issues, on how we are discriminating people by this immunity certification, and how much capacity can deal a plane, for example, how many people can deal in this situation. So as well, we will need to decide on public policies on how the international flights will be open. And the final phase will be when all restrictions can be lifted. And there are some musts that we will need to accomplish before doing that. The first is to have a robust surveillance system, so we can control very well the virus and how it's spread. That there is widespread testing, The third one, a robust ability to implement isolation and quarantines. And I forgot to mention this, but the isolation is another public policy that is taken in many Asian countries when people are, so one of the main Asian public policies taken, and they are proud of that, is that in many cases, the spread is got by the families, right? So people that are maybe asymptomatic and are spreading the virus when they come home. So there were a lot of hotels and places provided, so anyone with the virus was during 2 weeks having the quarantine in a different place, right? And this is something we haven't tried in Spain, and there is more and more debate if that would be needed instead of coming home and staying in your room. Therapeutics and vaccines will be definitely something highly considered to lift all the restrictions. And finally, on rebuilding our readiness for the next pandemic will be very important to feel confident in our society. So more or less, this is a summary that I wanted to launch on different public policies that are had in different places, and we need to consider to go from the reopening phases to the final one when all the restrictions will be lifted. So the next thing is going to be education. And to talk about that, we have Alfredo Ollanguren. He is assistant professor from the University of Oviedo. And we are gonna, education, as we know, not only from the university, but also at the school, we have switched from face-to-face lectures to distance learning. So there are challenges and opportunities in that kind of transition. So it will be nice if Alfredo, you can speak a little bit about that, and also how the lockdown is affecting grants, theses, and other scientific activities at the university.
All right, thank you, Borja. Yeah, I'm going to try to do that in slightly less than 5 minutes. But I'm going to start by stating the obvious. We live in uncertain times. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that uncertainty is tough. Particularly is tough for those that are about to graduate, being PhD students or undergrad students. What's going to happen? I'm going to graduate this year, and all the plans that were right after graduation, right? So universities, my university here in Oviedo and universities all over the world are focusing on 2 things. One is no student misses the year, so particularly last year students. And second, at the same time, maintaining or keeping high academic standards, and that's a difficult one. So, and like in any other field or any other aspect of life, we are making emergency decisions, and the emergency decision, probably the obvious one in education, is to go for online teaching, and there are good things with that. There are tools, there are lots of tools, and most universities have those tools, things like Moodle or like MS Teams, or pretty much every university have a platform for teaching, and those are perfect. Those are, I could say that they are designed for a situation like this. So we have the tools, and there is knowledge. Universities like Open University in the UK and other universities, they have been researching on how to deliver education or how to teach online. So the knowledge is there, the tools are there. But there's a problem. In traditional universities, like most universities, neither students nor teaching staff, professors, are trained for that. They don't know how to use those tools. We are not used to that. We are not familiar with that. We lack the experience and in many cases the knowledge. So there's some discomfort, I could say. For example, the students are uncertainty. I was talking about uncertainty before. Uncertainty about how they are going to be evaluated is the worst thing for a student. Knowing what do I need to do, right? And they also complain about overload. Some professors are being just crazy and sending lots of stuff, much more than they would in normal times. And the students are complaining about that. Professors are complaining about lack of engagement from some students. But this solution of online teaching has a few requirements for both sides, for teaching staff and for students. We need to have reliable, high quality internet connection, let's say, Wi-Fi or whatever. We need to have good computers. I mean, we need to have a computer with a camera, with a microphone, sometimes with software, depending on the degrees. I was reading about an architecture degree student that he didn't have the software at home or the quality computing at home. And the third thing is a quiet place to do all that. And not everyone has that. So some inequalities, I mean, it's exacerbating some differences, social differences or economic differences. Plus the demands. I mean, the university is not paying for my computer, for my camera, for my internet connection, but I'm supposed to do that. Right? By no means for the students. So some students, they don't have access to that. So because they are requiring things that 6 months ago they were not required. When you enroll at a university to do, I don't know, evolutionary biology, you don't need to have a computer. You don't need to have this and that they need now in order to finish the degree. But I think my take-home message here is that we are learning as we go, both professors, students, everybody. Just very briefly about the problems with research. We're hearing about medical research, which is, of course, giving absolute priority right now, but non-medical research, more my field, which is more zoology, ecology, these kind of things. One thing is a massive disruption of field work and lab work, which is, let's say, less essential than understanding virology, right? So people that do seasonal research, they study the growing season of plants or animals, this spring, this summer is going to be interrupted. We're talking about long time data series, 40 years of every summer registering whatever, that's going to be interrupted. Some lab work is going to be interrupted, and there are no evident solutions for these people. And also master students, PhD candidates, people that are on fellowships, they are running out of funding this year, for example. There's a long letter from the Postgrad Association in Cambridge University. They have over 4,000 signatures already. And they are asking for something that they think it's interesting, which is a structural response from British funding agencies, which is just to extend everyone's funding. I don't think that's going to happen. The National Science Foundation in the United States has given what they call a no-cost one-year extension, which is, yeah, you can continue doing research for an extra year after this is done, but we are not going to give you more money. And in Spain, well, there's questions and answers in the website of the research agency, but basically what they are doing is extending deadlines for applications and not much more. So again, lots and lots of uncertainty there, and lots of disruption, but nothing new, nothing different from other fields, of course. But as I said, we are learning as we go with teaching, with research, and with everything else. So that's my little bit of contribution here.
Thank you very much, Alfredo. And finally, the last theme is about society, and we have Gonzalo Bernat. He's a senior product manager at Rappi, working in Bogota, Colombia. And well, it would be nice to, for example, to know how food delivery companies are adapting their services for these lockdowns and the isolation measures that we are having. And somehow, how will this crisis accelerate the adoption of remote work cultures in companies?
Sure.
Thank you, Gonzalo.
Thank you, Borja, and thank you everyone for joining this conference. So this time will be remembered as a great example of how companies need to really adapt quickly to survive. In a matter of days, many businesses needed to adapt to this new environment, as Marco mentioned, with no idea of what's going to happen next. So I just wanted to talk about and give an example about the industry I work in and how these delivery companies are adapting to this new situation. So for some context, I work for Rappi, which is the biggest on-demand delivery platform in Latin America. It's similar, the business is similar to Glovo, Deliveroo, or DoorDash in other countries. And yeah, we have a big opportunity here, a big business opportunity. So if we do this well, we can help a lot of people stay at home, bring their food to their places, bring their shopping, bring their restaurant food, also like bring packages from one place to another to avoid, so actually to help them stay isolated. But also, it's a big challenge because if we do this wrong, we can put a lot of people and also our businesses at risk, spreading the disease mainly. So just for context, our platform have 3 players: the merchants, which are restaurants or supermarkets, the users, and the couriers who take the packages from one place to another. So first of all, the first specific action that some of these delivery companies needed to do was to be sure that the delivery was contactless. So we had to train our couriers to leave the food outside of the house. We also needed to work with the restaurants to make sure that they seal the packaging in a way that we minimize the spread of the virus. We also had to train users to receive the package in this contactless delivery fashion. And we also had to change some things on the app to make this possible. So as you see, so I just wanted to put this as an example of how a company really needs to do this very quickly. First, they need to figure out what to do and then how to transform their operations very quickly to adapt to this new challenge. Also, a lot of companies, including ours, are supporting couriers, giving them some funds in case they fall ill. Normally, these couriers are contractors. They are not workers from the platforms. But in this case, we thought that we needed to give them this special support, and a lot of the platforms are doing that. Also, there's a lot of people that are not used to using smartphone apps. Most of them are the elderly people. So what we did at Rappi is to set up phone services where the elderly could call and place their order in this fashion. And also another trend that is rising very quickly due to this coronavirus crisis is dark kitchens. So this is basically a restaurant that has no tables, so they only produce food so that they can deliver it. So this trend is also growing a lot to adapt to this new situation. So if we could go to the following slide. This slide is to answer the question of how companies will adapt to this remote culture. So companies realized that there was a lot of value in some workers doing some of their work from home, but there were some barriers to this. So first, some managers, and there's like a culture of thinking that if the worker, if you can see your worker and your worker is at home, he maybe is slacking off, like in this joke in this slide, he might be at the beach or doing something else. He might be not as productive as if he was in the workplace. And also, as Alfredo mentioned in education, there was a lack of resources for workers to work from home, and also a lack of know-how and the culture behind this to do this productively. So everything that is happening in education and that Alfredo mentioned also applies to businesses. So a lot of companies didn't have the means and didn't have the know-how about how to do this. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, this is another joke, but it's not a joke. It's actually true. It's a lot of companies had this in their agenda, taking their culture to remote culture, but they were actually not investing enough, not training their workers to do this. But the coronavirus forced them to do it. So it's a great opportunity so that we can test that this is going to work. Can we go to the next slide, please? I think this is going to work because we're going to be able to prove, or a lot of companies are going to be able to prove, that productivity is not affected by working from home. Actually, a lot of them are going to show that productivity is going to increase. Also, companies are going to see, as they already were thinking, that they're going to save time for the company. They're going to save office space rent. They're going to save food that they don't need to give to employees. They're going to save in transportation, in expensive flights, in accommodation for a lot of meetings that you can do online. And also employees are going to save because they now may not need to live in the most expensive area in the city to be close to the workplace. They might live in other place when they manage to be location independent. Also, a big advantage for companies that they're going to realize is that they will unlock access to worldwide workforce. So they won't be restricted to recruiting people just in their area, but they could have access to talent worldwide. that is a big competitive advantages for companies that adapt to this remote culture quickly. And in the next slide, we can see that also workers will demand this location independence. So in these two surveys, you can see that a lot of workers would like to work from home or have the possibility to work from home, and they're going to demand that from their companies for the reasons that you can see in the graph at the left. So I think that this remote work culture is here to stay. And in the last slide, I just want to give my 2 pieces of advice to make a good transition to this type of working. So the first one is I would encourage everyone to improve their reading communication. So our communication is going to transition from being synchronous, so being talking one-to-one in the telephone or in a casual meeting in the workplace, to writing a lot of emails, writing a lot of Slack messages, WhatsApp, memorandums, blogs, things like that. So you will need to be very sharp with what you write to make this communication efficient. And the second one would be, it's going to be more difficult to grow your network and to do networking face-to-face. We were used to do this in the workplace by talking to a colleague, having a coffee, or maybe if the Infi conference was to be held offline, we will be talking after the conference, but we're not going to have this opportunity. So you need to learn how to do this online. There's a lot of strategies, and you can read a lot about this online, so I'm not going to enumerate those. So this is just my 2 cents on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Very, very interesting, the different research about remote working. So now we have finished with the speakers, and as you can see, the questions and answers are quite hot, and we have so far 16 questions already. So please, you can write your question there, and we are gonna tackle them. So I will try, in order to be efficient, I will try to coordinate some of these questions and answers a little bit based on the order of the speakers and the order of the questions. So the first two for Jordina. There was one from Alberto. Alberto is saying, Johns Hopkins is mainly compiling information about health organizations around the world, but each organization is considering different methodologies to compute infected people. So in his opinion, to publish information from infected cases in that way is very imprecise. So he's asking, or he's wondering, if we don't think it would be easier and more accurate to consider a kind of rule of thumb, like for example, 2% of death rate, to extrapolate that figure with the number of cases, because deaf people would be more consistent data to obtain global information and to be able to compare the numbers. And the second question from another anonymous guest was, so knowing that the crisis started in December, why, for example, I mean, this is a general question, but this person was mentioning Johns Hopkins, how Johns Hopkins was reacting from December, like having a lot of expertise on public health. Why, in global, I mean, in general, for all of us, it took so much time to act in time? So please, Jordina, if you can answer these questions.
Thank you, Borja. So Alberto, for the first question, I think is a very interesting question. And yes, I agree that probably this is not a precise way to collect the number of cases. But what I can tell is that it is as precise as it's gonna be right now. So these data, I completely agree, that comes from different governments, different organizations. Each country is using their own numbers. But as the CDC says in their own website, CDC here in the United States updates the cases only once a day. And it updates those cases using the state and territorial resources, like the hospitals, what the hospitals are declaring to the healthcare communities. And the CDC in their own website says that the numbers provided by these small state and territorial departments are more accurate than the CDC numbers itself, because it's where the CDC is getting those numbers from. So I still think that is the most accurate information that we are going to have. And I would like to point out two things. One, I think that the true and real number of both cases and death rates are only going to be known after the fact. So once this is hopefully in a much better situation, we will be able to look back, look at the data with a little bit more time, and be able to say, okay, these are the number of cases that we had, and this is the death rate. And the reason why I don't think that this rule of thumb of 2% is more accurate than that is mainly because this 2% number also come from this data collection. It's not that this 2% is a magic number that comes from nowhere. It also comes from this data collection. And this mortality rate, as we are seeing, is very variable. We don't know why it's variable. Is it variable because people are collecting the numbers in a different way and reporting the deaths from coronavirus in a different way? Or is it variable because the health in general of each country is different? So in a regional community where there's increased number of comorbidities such as diabetes, respiratory problems at baseline, it is not surprising that the death rate is going to be a little bit higher than in other communities where the general health is a little bit better. So for those two reasons, because I think these numbers are coming from the same place, and because of it varies country to country, I think that this is still, unfortunately or fortunately, the best information that we have to date. And then for the second question, from the anonymous participant, I completely agree with you. I actually was very mad and disappointed that, especially in the United States, we didn't react faster. I don't know exactly why that's the case, and I also think it's a combination of facts. One, a lot of people were saying this is what's going to happen. A lot of experts and people were not truly listening to them because it is difficult to understand and very difficult. So criticizing is not going to help to understand the impact that unknown disease is going to have in your country. And second, reacting in reality means that we have to put a lot of our economical resources to this thing that hasn't happened yet. So we are working on assumptions. And again, although criticizing is not going to help, I think that for the governments, it has been very difficult to, one, believe that this is going to affect a country like this great, huge country. And second, it's hard to mobilize the resources, close economy, and make this huge shift in the resources with something that it's truly unknown. So, yeah, the most important thing that, in my opinion, we have to do is to learn from what has happened so far and try to avoid it in the short term and in the long term.
Thank you very much, Jordina. So I'm gonna maybe address these questions to Alicia, but maybe Jordina or someone else who works in hospitals, they can also provide or complement. So there are 2 or 3 questions interesting about that. Alvaro is proposing a couple of questions. The first one is, do hospitals use 3D printers, which are normally used for surgical planning, for example, to print protective equipment such as screens for mouth and eyes? Actually, my sister is a nurse, and we were talking about that because they are using them, but Alicia can complement. The second question is related to hackathons and common COVID-19 projects. One clear example is the development of ventilators. Some of these projects have been already a prototype, like the Open Ventilator project, but they have to be tested on patients, and it's not possible to produce them massively in a very short period of time. So therefore, would not be important to check and use with the proper maintenance all ventilators which had been used in hospitals in the past until some ventilator projects could produce their device massively? And finally, there was a question from Antonio asking, so you represented 3 different phases in the illness. So what is the duration, the average duration of each of them? Thank you, Alicia. So Alicia, are you with us?
Sorry? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. So considering the first question about the 3D printers, I know they are trying to use them to create, for example, some connectors for the non-ventilation patients, the patients that need non-invasive ventilation, so that they can use this type of of approach, although it's not been homologated, so it's not been very widespread use. As far as I know, they are trying to use this to help these pneumology units to use these ventilation monitors and equipments. However, I'm not very sure that they are using them for equipment. We're using more like the general equipment, but I'm not sure that they are using them for other types of equipment. And considering, maybe someone else can help with this question. Considering the ventilators, as far as I know, we've been using all the resources that we have when we have this high amount of patients that needed ventilation. And well, what we've seen is that we seem to need more ventilators rapidly produced. So there were some initiatives such as the open ventilator, which I collaborate with them in the medical field. And I think that, well, of course, they need to be validated. They need to be safe for the patients, and what they've done is that they are already proved on animals, and they have been proven to be safe on animals, so they are going to hospitals right now. We are also doing a clinical trial in order to introduce this ventilator in the clinics. However, there are a lot of phases on the clinical trial and also on the production of these ventilators. So I don't know if we have another wave, they might be useful right now for us, but maybe they are also useful for other countries or other communities that are now in the need of more ventilators. So as far as I know, we are using all the resources we have, and there was a real need for more. So there were some initiatives such as this one to create safe equipment, but rapidly and massively produced. And about the last question, the duration of illness, I would say that not all patients suffer the 3 phases. This is a proposed model for the disease, but we have seen that some patients suffer just, for example, anosmia and angioedema for 3 or 4 days, and then they are tired for 1 week, but they don't really evolve to the second phase. So, well, I would say that all the patients evolve to the second phase, and we have seen that they are mostly evolving on day 7 to 10, even 14. So we are very, observing or like very close to these patients, because we know that when they are ill, it's over 1 to 2 weeks. And then patients evolving to phase 3, what we've seen is that they need ventilation. When they need a mechanical ventilation, they need it for 14 days, so almost 2 weeks. So maybe maybe the disease as a whole, if you suffer the 3 phases, could last for 1 month or even more than 1 month.
Thank you very much, Alicia. So the next question from Santiago Delgado, I think maybe Ana Cadete, or again, if anyone else wants to complement, please go ahead. What is the rationale, and I think you were speaking about this in the chat, what is the rationale of using BCG for COVID-19? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, so first, if you're interested in clinical trials, I think I recommend you to go to raps.org. They are continuously updating, and they are doing a great job in telling us which medicines are starting new clinical trials. So for the BCG, I think there's 3 main answers here. The first one is that the World Health Organization have been told that this vaccine can be used for other non-tuberculosis bacterial infections. And also there are some groups that were doing research and publishing papers and saying that the vaccine could have a positive impact in some of the respiratory tract infections viruses. And the third one, it comes from the fact that it has seen that countries like Portugal, where the BCG vaccine was mandatory until 3 years ago, we are responding better to the pandemic. So this can also be an important fact. Something that I would like to aware as a pharmacist is that these are seen as very good news, because we already have a vaccine available, as well as some of the treatments like the hydrochloroquine. What we should pay attention is that we shouldn't just run to the pharmacy and try to buy one of these vaccines, because it seems to prove that it has some positive effects against the coronavirus. And we should be mindful that a lot of people and sick patients and babies that are born, they still need to get these vaccines before a healthy person like us. And even if these clinical trials with BCG come positive, we have to think that manufactured capacity was not made to at this time has billions of vaccines prepared. And even if they start preparing the vaccine, we need the drug, we need the virus, and we need the excipients. And this is a circuit of a process. So the excipients sometimes come from countries like India that right now are not operating at the same pace. And so it's just to aware that you need to be mindful. This clinical trial must be really important, but we need to wait to the final outcome and wait for the government to tell us when we should get one of these shots if it proves to be efficacious.
Thank you very much, Anna. I would like to, there are some economic and financial questions that maybe Marco could give us some insights. Brandon Williams was asking, to what extent do you think the economy of European countries will suffer as a result of this unprecedented outbreak? And there was another one from Sergio Castaño. So he was highlighting the painful economic consequences that we are going to have. And he was mentioning the high unemployment rates, and he was wondering, or he was asking, how small and medium businesses and enterprises could face the future without enough resources.
I mean, regarding the first one, I think, it depends on what's the government's response to this crisis, right? Like we've seen for the past week or week and a half, the governments in the European Union have been discussing how much they were going to help. And it looks like at the end of the last week, they finally reached an agreement. But as you can see, the political process over there is different than here in the United States. Eventually, they might come to it. They might come to an agreement and then, have, enough help sent to the markets. The European Central Bank, same kind of thing, is still like the decisions seem to me that are a little bit slower than here. But it's just my personal opinion. So we'll see. I think think about a country like Spain, for example, heavily dependent on tourism. To me, it feels like this summer it would be a huge impact on the economy on that specific sector, right? Like if you think about a prospect tourist going to Spain, I would think about it twice. Or Italy or Portugal, right? Like typical countries that are based on tourism. So that's going to have an impact, obviously. For how long is hard to say. In terms of, can you repeat the second question again, please?
Yeah, definitely. How small and medium businesses could face the impact of this crisis actually without resources? That is the opinion of Sergio Castaño.
Yeah, again, I feel like the small businesses are in a hard spot because they have to rely on help from the government somehow. I think these situations is the role of the governments to step in and help their economies in however way we can. Banks. There are some proposals that or some measures where banks are going to give loans, either backed by governments or subsidized by government or forgivable loans or something like that. Like different governments will use different formulas, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a government having to step in and basically bail out the economies. To what extent they can do that for small businesses is still pending to see. It will impact the debts of any government, and at the end of the day, is how much debt can a country take on to survive through how many months this will last. So it all comes down to that, I believe, because the governments are the only ones that are going to be able to help backstop the economy somehow.
I just wanted to add on Marco's answer. I think that depending on the business model, but I just wanted to provide some examples where small businesses are actually adapting to the new situation and turning this into their advantages. So some of them are, for example, like personal trainers or gyms where they are offering their classes on the online, and some of them are differentiating themselves and they have access to more people than they had before when they were dependent on location. So good personal trainers now are having a lot of people as clients. Also, some restaurants and small restaurants are leveraging delivery options and are growing a lot as well. So of course, it depends a lot on the business model, but there are some things that small businesses can do to adapt. Just to see it from the positive side, of course, most of them are going to have a hard time through this crisis. And also, as Marco mentioned, I agree that the governments will have a huge role in helping small businesses get through this crisis, and they should, because they employ a lot of people. But also, each individual can do their part to sustain them. So I've seen some initiatives where you can buy like some kind of gift cards from a small business that you like. So you're providing them cash. With that cash, they can still pay their workers. And it's not a donation. The idea is that you would go in a month when the quarantine is over, or maybe 2 months, who knows, and maybe get your haircut or get your meal or something like that. So what they need now is some cash flow, and that's the way each of us could help our favorite small businesses to stay alive.
Going back to that, as one of the measures that the government is going to take, they're going to send to as many people as they can, like a check for a certain amount of money, and with the intent that people will go out and purchase things and put money into the people's pockets, so the economy can start moving again once this ends. We'll see.
Borja, I would like to add the healthcare perspective from this economical standpoint. As you know, the United States healthcare system is a very profitable one, and it is also suffering the economical consequences of this pandemic, especially because of the conservational efforts. A lot of the hospitals have ended all the profitable part of medicine, including elective surgeries. And I don't have data from Johns Hopkins for that, but I have data from my colleagues at the Mayo system, and the CEO was informing the other day that they are projecting a loss of $900,000 million because of the coronavirus pandemic. I don't know how this is being living in Spain, but these will have to be taken into account as well, because of the healthcare will have to continue happening after this pandemic. And there are measures already being implemented as cutting the salaries for everybody across the board.
Thank you, Jordina. So the next questions are about some public policies. I might start, and then please the other panelists, if you want to contribute. Anonymous speaker, an anonymous guest participant is asking, what is the most important policy measure that we will have to include to our governments to mitigate crises like this? What would you change in our laws to mitigate this economic and health catastrophe? Then J.R. Pinto was asking about those countries who have been providing facilities to isolate people. So do we see that as a reliable or positive measure that we should take? And there is another question about the European General Data Protection Regulation, if it's a major obstacle in order to trace people through their smartphones. So regarding the first one, policy measures, I think the public policy measures are a little bit like system dynamics. Like, I don't know, there is no like one best one than the other. So you have a pile of different policies that we need to take. And depending on the context, the scale where we are, our capacity, then some of them will be more important than others. So in our case, for example, because we didn't have the capacity of doing mass testing or widespread testing or doing tracking with the smartphones, for example, our lockdown was more strict and our quarantines have been longer than, for example, in South Korea, where they have been doing massive testing and using technologies to track positive cases. So the lockdown has been very short, actually. So it's going to depend on which policies you are putting more weight, or you are quicker to implement, then ones will be more important than others. So, but in general, as I mentioned, I mean, the testing capacity, the capacity of your healthcare, practices like wearing masks, tracking, avoiding crowds, the disinfection and hygiene, there are different things that all of them, they should be worked in parallel. Because all of them, they are going to help us. But obviously, it's going to depend as well on the economic trade-offs that these kind of policies might have. And providing facilities, I think in countries like China, it has been working, and in other Asian places as well. I think if you provide facilities, it will be very important that you are providing as well widespread testing, because otherwise you are very slow. I mean, if you are testing a person who maybe had been positive since the last 4 days, suddenly you are going to isolate that person, and maybe that person has been already spreading in the family. So you are maybe spending resources very late, right? But indeed, I think actually many people on volunteer basis might go to these places, or these facilities, because they might be living with people that are vulnerable, or people that are high vulnerable population. So for those ones, being in a place or in a facility where they could be a couple of weeks until they are not anymore positive, probably it's gonna be good. Also, these public policies, it will depend on your goal, right? I think the goal of our, for example, European countries and the US is kind of like a slow the spread, but it's not so strict as Korea, or South Korea, or China, that at some point it looks like they want to stop the spread, right? And how feasible is that? I mean, to stop it. Because at some point we are going to start opening borders again, and because this is a global crisis, how much we can slow down, or how much we can stop it. So that's another, what is our main goal in our society? So this is another question we need to make ourselves, right? And of course, considering that every life is important. So it's a little bit of playing with the system dynamics. With regard to the European General Data Protection Regulation, I'm not an expert on that, so unfortunately I cannot answer the question, but maybe someone else could provide more insights. So another question for Alfredo on education. What is the best test method that could be recommended to evaluate nowadays in the universities? And another question from Alejandra, the last one was from Antonio. Another question from Alejandra: what is kind of like your opinion on the impact on secondary and primary education?
Regarding the method, it depends on who you ask, but in general, the best method is continuous assessment under this situation and under normal conditions, not just one exam, one test in which you score the students, and actually that's what the Bologna program in Spain, and it's been done in the UK and most American universities for a long time. So keep evaluating small things like essays, participation, lots of different activities that test different things, not just finding a test. If you want to do a traditional exam or a traditional test, pretty much every platform have methods for that. Moodle has tools for doing exams. Of course, there's the question of, particularly from older professors, older than me, yes, students are going to be connecting through the mobile phones, and they are going to copy each other. I don't think that's an issue. I mean, it's an issue if your exams are purely memoristic, but if your exams are good, then that's not a problem. Regarding other levels of education, yes, I was talking about higher education, which is what I know firsthand. I think it's even worse for primary and secondary education in terms of access to facilities and conditions. I don't think there's anything realistic that we can do to fix that now. I mean, I think just to be optimistic, I think what we could do is to use the current state of emergency to build something better in terms of inclusiveness, resiliency, and sustainability. So we need to use these, what's happening now, I think at every level, but educationally, just to build something better. Yes.
Yeah, Alfredo, no, sorry, to be fair on Alejandra's question, because it was a bit more specific. She's actually asking if we know any current initiative or project that track the current challenges that primary and secondary education are facing, but specifically regarding education support for those families that are in communities at risk. So because they have limited access to technology, to ICTs, etc.
Yeah, I don't know because, I mean, I don't know, but because my field is higher education and that's that. But I would say it's very hard right now. I think it's something realistic for the future, for the next one, but not for now, to be honest with you. But I don't know.
Yeah. And thank you very much, Alfredo. And for Alejandro, for Gonzalo Bernat, there are a couple of questions from Alvaro and Antonio. Alvaro Planchuelo is asking about productivity working from home. Did the corresponding research consider factors such as children in home, a common situation currently? Because it's true that most of these results and research were done when maybe remote working was considered for 1 or 2 days and children were at the school, right? So, and would the working from home productivity would be sustainable in a long-term situation, not from specific days from the week? And the question from Antonio Luque, the advantages of remote working have been shown, but there are, of course, inconveniences, sometimes outweighing the advantages. Could you please comment on them?
Sure. So for Alvaro's question, for his first question, I think the answer is no. The research did not consider factors such as having children at home. As you mentioned, this research was done in the past. I think the data I consulted was from 2019, so it did not include the actual situation of taking care of children at home. So, and that's a very interesting question because a lot of parents are having to take care of their children while they're working, and this is a very challenging situation. Before, they have a person who was taking care of their children at the school or wherever, but now they have to do this to work. So this is not more productive than being in the office, of course. That's the answer to the first question. The second question, would the working from home productivity be sustainable in a long-term situation? I think that working from home, if done properly, and which means having your space, having your equipment, your furniture, will be more productive. If parents need to take care of their children and work, that would not be as more productive than being in the office. But I think that if everything is done right, it will be more productive. Also, I'm talking about, the disclaimer will be about office jobs. There are a lot of jobs that, of course, can be done from home. So those are not included in here. And for Antonio's question about the disadvantages of working at home and inconvenience. So of course, there are many inconveniences. According to respondents of one survey I have here from Buffer, most of them mention unplugging after work, and in my experience, that's true. You are sharing the same space for your working life and your personal life, so it's very difficult to get apart, to unplug, and also to find your personal time and dissociate that. Also, the second thing is remote workers feels more lonely. It's difficult to have that social interaction. But there are a lot of measures and initiatives that people are doing to fight against that. So, for example, I'm having like some casual meetings with my coworkers just to chat about life and not talk about work or anything. And that would try to mimic the thing that you would be doing in the office when you're having coffee or something like that. So you need to be like very intentional about keeping those social contacts, even if you're working from home, because if not, you will spend the whole day just working and talking about serious stuff, and your social relationship with your coworkers will be seriously damaged. Also, at home, there are a lot of distractions, like kids, if you have them, noises. So you really need to find to think about the strategies to make a good use of your time at home, and to put everything in place to be more productive. It's not something that is gonna come to you just by taking your laptop to your kitchen or to your bedroom at home.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Maybe Marco, you can help us a little bit with one question mainly. Vilma was asking, how do you think real estate will be affected by this economic shutdown and the capacity, especially the capacity for selling and buying properties and the value of these properties? And Alberto mentioned something that maybe we have been responding during the talk and during the question and answers. He has been analyzing a lot the effects of previous pandemics in history. And actually in the Black Plague during 18th century, there were several outbreaks of the illnesses. So that means that probably we will suffer as well several outbreaks. So how the society and the economy can better face these new spikes that most probably we will have until the vaccine is distributed.
I think for the real estate, for sure, in the short term, there is going to be an impact. I think that the market here, at least, is slowing down, and there are not as many listings as there used to be at this time of year. If the circumstances were normal. In the long term, I think it will probably, in the medium term, is going to be affected as well. I think just out of higher unemployment rate is going to affect house prices for sure, and I believe that it will depend on will be on a market by market, that you have to look at things differently, right? Like how each market is going to be affected by unemployment. Maybe here in Boston, the unemployment rate won't go as high as other places like, I don't know, Philadelphia or whatever, like each market is different. So it will affect each market differently depending on what the unemployment rate is per area. Different outbreaks, like again, that was the point I wanted to make earlier about the uncertainty. How this is gonna pan out over time is very difficult to predict. And if we have more outbreaks, which I think we probably have, I think it's going to come down to what decisions the governments do on how to deal with this. Can we be, for a sustained period of time, doing this, what we are doing right now? Is that sustainable at all from an economic perspective? I don't think so. For how long can economies be alive and working properly with people staying at home, not buying houses, not going on vacation, not flying, etc., right? That can have huge consequences. So it will have to be a decision on governments on how are we going to deal with this going forward. And it's going to be a tough one, because imagine, like you have to decide almost what's more important. Is it the economy or is it the health? Can I have one without the other? I don't know. There is again, uncertainty is the key word here, and we'll have to play it by ear, and some decisions will have to be made about how to deal with this going forward. That's
Thank you, Marco. The last two questions, and then we will finalize this super interesting session. One about education that more or less we tackle it, but maybe we can complement it. And I invite as well not only Alfredo but Joaquin, who works at the university. Maybe he can comment on his experience, how we can evaluate the students from lower levels than university without a presential test. Educational patrons say us that family members help students doing the activities. Even more, there are at least 10% of the students without internet access, so we could not be objective. Just a quick comment, because I work at the university. Nowadays, what we are also considering is that usually we provide synchronous classes. That means that people connect to a specific time, so unique connectivity. But now the idea is to combine synchronous with asynchronous. And that means that you can have classes that there is plenty of flexibility, and there are different homeworks, there are online forums where you can adapt your time and the level of your connectivity based on you, and it's quite flexible. So you can work without need of being at one specific time, having internet, etc. So we are using these kind of asynchronous methods to compensate for those ones that have lower connectivity. But please, Alfredo and Joaquin, if you want to complement from your experience.
Well, yeah. So I think that's, well, Alfredo has already commented on the challenges of this situation. I think that we are not fully ready for this. We have all the tools, and now I think that every university is trying to do the best they can. So I think that this is a an effort that probably will be everything ready in a few months. It's really unclear how it's going to be the final decision about how to decide on the final grades. And I think that this is an ongoing discussion, and we are all eager to know what is going to be the final decision, because it doesn't have an easy answer. I think that especially because everything has happened so fast, and hopefully everything will be ready or settled for next year. I think that we are all eager to know what is the decision. I agree with Alfredo with his comments that the continuous evaluation is probably the best way to go, because I think that students, especially the youngest one, are more used to this kind of evaluation. So I think that for them it's going to be easy to adapt. And about the final exam and how this could be done, I think that this is still an ongoing and open question. I don't know if Alfredo has an answer for that.
No, not really. I mean, I keep trying to look forward ahead, just thinking that we need to learn, we need to adapt, we need to innovate to improve these things for the next one. I mean, right now, emergency decisions, I mean, probably we are doing something remarkable, something very good. We all are under the situation, but I think there's not much that can be done really.
Thank you very much. And the last question, and we close the session. Do you believe that this pandemic will rethink the rules of their health system and budgets provided? So I don't know, maybe one person that has been talking on medicine. What's your opinion about this?
I can also comment on the innovation side.
Go ahead, Anna.
Okay, yeah, so I think it's important to have an idea about from the medical side and from the R&D side. So from the R&D, I think like this is clearly going to change the way society and governments look at researchers. If you see, we are usually in the last line of this pathway, and right now everyone is with their eyes on us, and everyone, like the globe, is just praying for some research to come with a solution for the problem. So I think like in the future there is going hopefully to be more budget allocated for early research and development, and in special vaccines, because if we see, vaccines are one of those medicines that people usually have in the side because they usually don't give you profit. So you have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation financing a lot of this research, because then you are going to take it to countries that usually don't have money to pay for it. So I think like there is going to be a rethink about how many manufacturing factories do we need, and who is going to actually speed up research in the case that we actually need a new vaccine or a medicine. And just picking a little bit of the work from home and the problems, I think like we are also going to have some issues in the future for R&D, because working from home is not usually what a scientist does, right? We work in the lab, we need our tools to do research, and we've been adapting it to work from home. And I think here there's two main takeaways, which is from one side, you see that people that are working in the vaccines and the manufacturing are on demand. So you need more scientists, you need more researchers, technicians, analysts, etc. But you also will see that some small startups that need some early research and right now are not generating data for the next stage of funding may be in troubles if we are not able to come back to the lab and actually show that our results can work.
Thank you very much, Anna. This is 6 p.m. Madrid time, so already we have a couple of hours, and I think we should close the session. I would like to remind that In5 Foundation and its platform work completely online. So during the last years, the foundation has been able to connect people from Spain, Portugal, in the US, Mexico, Colombia, different countries in Europe, and connect researchers, provide contests and partnership to innovate and produce new ideas. and to provide this online mentoring and working on education in a way online. So we really invite universities and private companies and other institutions to contact us, to contact the foundation in FAE, and to see how we can collaborate further on initiatives online during this period of time, because in FAE is one of the main strengths of the foundation. Provide sessions like these ones is one of the examples. So I really want to thank Jordina, Alicia, Patricia, Joaquin, Ana, Marco, Alfredo, and Gonzalo for being with us from the different places in the world. Again, thank you, Maria, for your efforts organizing the talk, and stay safe, healthy, be positive, and let's keep working together to combat COVID-19. Ciao, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.